never know if it could change your life. Take a chance, you need the wrong or right. You never know if you don't run.
Hello, and welcome to a special episode of Dungeon Master None. I am Dungeon Master Matt, and today I have two very special guests with me in the podcast studio. The inventor of the 3-clue rule and don't prep plots, our special blog correspondent, Justin, the Alexandrian Alexander, RPG producer at Atlas Games. Justin, welcome to the Pod Zone, OGL edition.
Thank you so much for having me. Thank you so much for having me.
And my absolutely favorite D&D YouTube creator of all time. Seriously, this is someone who is not just a YouTube creator, but a video essayist. If you haven't watched the video on metagaming by Legal Kimchi, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. Wow, your favorite.
Yes, I'm going to say it. I really enjoyed the metagaming video. It changed my life. And, we're here because we just want to relax and talk. Everything I think is fine in the Dungeons & Dragons world. It's fine in the D&D world. No major news. We're just here to chill out and relax.
2023 has been a really peaceful year. I look forward to being a continued peaceful year from now until the end of it. I think it's just going to be a great, smooth sailing finally.
We can finally just focus on the gaming, right? Let's have some fun times at the table. Let's not worry about anything else at all.
Well, unfortunately, thanks to the amazing reporting by Linda Codea over at Gizmodo, we have all read now the leaked update to Wizards of the Coast open gaming license for their new quasi-new edition of Dungeons & Dragons 1D&D. It's supposed to release like right now as we're recording this, but it has not, and it is I don't know. It's some bullshit. Well, I don't know. What do y'all think? What's going on here?
That's the technical legal term for it.
Yeah, I think we can say bullshit and end the podcast there, right? Like, I think we've summed up exactly what's going on.
Yeah. What was your, I think we probably all read this article right after it came out. What were your first reactions and thoughts?
For me personally, it was disbelief. I wanted it not to be the case. You know, I try to strive to be a calm and understanding voice and not contribute to panic. And especially because, I have a legal background. I work on contracts. That's my day job, right? That's the legal part of the kimchi. So there are tidbits in there where Linda was talking about like comments in it and things in there. And I was just like, this has to be a rough draft. This can't be the final. There's no way that they would be so foolish as to think that this would be something that would just fly under the radar, that the community would accept without a massive pushback. This is something as, for me, if I was the attorney there, I'd be like, guys, you really want to put this up? So I was in disbelief. So I initially wanted to think it was fake, that it was not a real leak, that it was just somebody playing a really elaborate prank, and then it just kept going, and it became more and more of a realization that this was not a fabrication. And then it just got sad.
For me, it was like going through the apocryphal stages of grief, and it started like actually a few weeks before Linda did their excellent reporting on this. Because mid-December, there'd been rumors circulating around. Mid-December, WotC issues their press release about the royalties, and I'm like, okay, so clearly we're going to move into like more of a 4th edition GSL, more closed, more we want to have our hand in the till kind of approach to it. I was kind of ready for that, and then like the day before Linda posted their article, there was a couple of leaks that came out that I was like, these can't possibly be true. And I was aided in that by the fact that they were it turned out were just random snippets of text in a random order kind of pasted into an email that made it sound even more amateurish than I think it actually is. So I was still in denial. I was still like, well, this has got to be some sort of weird forgery or fraud, or somebody's being fooled. And then Linda's article came out, and I was like, oh, this is really, really bad. And then we got access to the full text, and I was like, disbelief is the only thing you can really say. It took a while to really sink in that this was actually happening.
I guess I think most of our dungeon masters who listen to the show have tried or at least thought about publishing their own adventure or supplement or something at one point or another. And so I think everyone who's listening to the show is vaguely aware of the open gaming license. But like, if you're just a player, maybe you're not like really ever thinking about these things. I guess, what is the thing in this new version, the OGL 1.1, that is just so like egregious that everyone from small creators to like big companies like Paizo and like MCDM and Cobalt Press are just doing, reacting in such a strong way?
It's 100% in my mind. It is what appears to be an attempt to create a legal loophole that lets them cancel the previous version of the open license and take it away in a way which is completely antithetical to the entire concept of open content, a complete violation of the trust and assurances of that legal document. And I'm sure Legal Chimchil will have a better insight than I do. I am not a lawyer, but to my eyes appears to be just a complete violation of the actual like words of the contract as well. And I think that's the biggest thing people are reacting to, is that it would be one thing if WotC was moving on with 6th edition. We aren't going to do open content anymore. They did that before in 2008 with 4th edition and what they called the game system license, the game system license back then. And so, they've done it before. We will find a way to move forward as an industry past that. But they're instead dropping a tactical nuke that says the entire open community, which has been created over the past 2 decades, we're going to drop a nuclear weapon and try to blow it all up. And not just like move on themselves, but to blow it up for everybody else. We're not going to just take your toys. We're going to melt them down in a nuclear reactor and make sure that no one can touch them for 1 million years.
Well, I mean, it's multiple reactions at the same time for me, because that was the one that tickled the legal portion of my brain. Because when you create an open license like that, which does not have an explicit termination, generally speaking, the old thing is, if you put it out there without the explicit outline of how you can terminate it or revoke it, then it's out there. And courts don't like pulling those back, because they don't like pulling the rug out from under folks. The whole point of the legal system is stability, is to create something that is consistent and something that you can rely on. Now, we can argue about the American legal system and all that sort of stuff, but the intent is that it creates that stability. Okay. And the attempt to revoke a license of this nature is going against the tradition of stability that's supposed to be inputted in the law. So that was chilling and confusing in my legal portion of my brain. One thing, and I'm sure you all may know this, a lot of content creators especially try to supplement what we do by creating materials that you can use in your game. Every single content creator of YouTube or what have you that I know of either is actively working on paper product to provide to Patreon through DriveThruRPG or DM's Guild, or have already done so. Okay. Even I was ruminating, I have this background in the law. I have a background in political science and empirical political theory. I've done videos on that. I'd love to create sort of a campaign context where, you could utilize actual empirical political theory inside of making a game of international intrigue and kingdoms and countries against each other and all that.
Sounds dope.
And I was in the planning stages, and I was talking to some folks about it and going through what the publishing process is and all that. And then this drops, and I was like, "Can I do this anymore? Wait a minute!" And it's one of those things where YouTube and content creation, especially, like YouTube, is not a moneymaker. Okay, because the D&D community is so niche. It's not like we're bringing in millions of subscribers. I don't know of any D&D YouTuber that's in the 5, 6, 10, 19 million subscribers that you see on some of these, super mainstream YouTubers. A lot of them supplement that through Patreon, and the rewards that we provide our Patreons are going to be, various things: access to the Discord, name in the credits, and because we're D&D people, and this is what we geek out about, supplements for your game. And that's all put in question now. Can we keep providing this?
For example, if you'd like to subscribe to the DungeonMasterOfNone.com Patreon, you can get supplements, including our Warlord class, 5 adventures, and a whole bunch of monsters and stuff. For now. Okay, so yeah, this is just blowing up all kinds of things.
Well, yeah, I mean, we talked from a publisher standpoint. So Atlas Games, I've been the RPG producer at Atlas Games since 2018, but Atlas Games has been around for about 30 years now. And back in 2000, Atlas Games was actually one of the very first publishers to get on board with the OGL.
Oh, right, yeah.
The founder of the company, John Nephew, had close working relationships with Ryan Dancy, who was the original architect of the open gaming license and the open gaming movement within Wizards. Atlas Games is one of the companies that Ryan came to and said, hey, we really need some early adopters of the open gaming license to convince people that it's a good idea. And so at that first Gen Con in 2000, when the 3rd edition Player's Handbook dropped and the OGL was coming out, there were 2 adventures that came out that very same day from third-party publishers. And one was 3 Days to Kill by John Tynes, which was published by Atlas, and the other was Death at Freeport, which was by Chris Pramis and was published by Green Ronin Publishing.
Great adventure. Have run it at least twice, if memory serves.
Those are both favorite adventures of mine. In fact, back then I launched 2 different. My first 2, I was actually in the playtesting for 3rd edition, but my first 2 full campaigns with 3rd edition. One was launched with 3 Days to Kill as the first adventure, and the other one was launched with Death in Freeport as the first adventure. And I think that's part of it. It's a bit of a tangent, but part of this is that this is what third-party content does for D&D, is that it gets people excited about running that third-party content. And then my players buy players' handbooks, and I buy supplements from Wizards of the Coast that support the campaigns that third-party content helps kickstart and sustain and maintain. And that's what gets lost. But so here at Atlas, we've had this long history, the longest history possible with working with the open gaming license. And Atlas and Atlas as a company has suffered some rug pulls from WotC in the past as far as the open gaming license goes. And so there was a real trepidation about getting into the open license again with 5th edition. And we just kind of recently began dipping our toes into that when we ran a Kickstarter for Plangea, which is a Stone Age fantasy setting by David Somerville for 5th edition. And we're in the middle of fulfilling that Kickstarter. We have the books at press right now. So as this drops out, me and John and Michelle, who is the co-owner of the company, are all looking at the license and trying to figure out, what is going on, what consequences does this have for us, and we have just tons of question marks. Of course, even once we know everything else, okay, well, what actually are the legal consequences of this, and how does that affect us as producers? Are we going to be able to fulfill the promises we've made to our customers? And so, it's panic inducing. And it was a very long weekend and it's been a very long week, trying to make sure we do everything we can to stand right by the people who have supported us and that we made promises to.
Jesus, that sucks ass. I mean, just as such a small creator and not having these worries, this isn't my full-time thing. I was just damn, if I ever want to write another D&D module or whatever, I have to do reporting now. This just seems like a hassle. I mean, the royalty thing seems like it's not that much money, but it's just a real, kick while you're down to smaller publishers. It's just all kinds of bad stuff in this leaked new OGL. What a nightmare.
It chills the entire concept of getting into it. I mean, the OGL provided an environment where everyone felt safe testing the waters and creating product for a major game, which increased the likelihood that people would actually review it, that people would actually buy it, and that they would play it, and you could get feedback, even if it was terrible. And it creates an education that is so hard to get anywhere else. I could sit on Twitter and release, the Legal Kimchi role-playing game, and would anybody buy it? Who knows? But if I were to release the Legal Kimchi adventure for 5th edition, 5th edition is owned by a whole bunch of people. I could probably weasel a couple of folks to play it, even at a local game store or something like that, and get some feedback to it, and I could cut my teeth and improve in the craft. It's just a phenomenal tool to, march forward, trip up, smash your teeth, get up, clean yourself off, try it again, and keep getting better. And the designers who are working on WotC products today, the talent that they have secured today, a lot of them cut their teeth on OGL.
And not just at Wizards, but across the entire industry. Like, one of the things I say as an RPG producer, because people ask me, how do I break in? How do I get published with a publisher? And I say, look, the first thing you have to do is you have to actually write something. The number of times people have said, like, what can I do to get published? I say, well, can you send me a sample of your work? And they're like, well, I don't have anything. I'm like, well, then I can't. I don't know what to tell you, man. Like, I got to see something that you've written. And the thing that the Open Gaming License does is it gives you the ability and an environment to create that material, whether it's for a blog or a Patreon or for DriveThruRPG. All of that gives you an opportunity to do that. And it's not, it's not just Wizards who then hires and benefits from that. It's the whole industry that benefits. Like, I have another game at Atlas called Magical Kitty Save the Day, and we have an adventure anthology that's coming out called Trouble in River City. And it's got a whole bunch of different authors working on adventures for that book. And like half of them are people I came across because they were active in the OGL community creating third-party content for D&D. And so I had a chance to be like, oh, this writer is great, and I should try and get them, on board working on new projects.
I guess before we get into more of the consequences and maybe try and, I guess, speculate about like what WotC is trying to accomplish with this new OGL. Justin, could you give us a brief history of what is the OGL? How did it come about? How's it changed in the past before we got to this point in 2023?
Well, I will do my best to keep it brief. I did actually just release a YouTube video that's 27 minutes long, summarizing the history of the OGL. So we'll try to do a little bit quicker than that. So the short version is that we'll hit the highlights. 1987, TSR, the original publishers of D&D, are going bankrupt. They get bought out by Wizards of the Coast in 1997. In 1999, Wizards of the Coast is bought out by Hasbro. In 2000, the third edition of D&D, which was the first project that Wizards of the Coast started working on when they bought TSR, gets published. And at this point in time, they are trying to figure out a couple of different things. They're trying to figure out how to market the game to a gaming industry, which particularly over the 90s had become very alienated by some of the corporate policies of TSR, and they wanted to figure out how can we reach back out to the community and get them interested in this game again.
Right. In the 90s, D&D's star had fallen. People were playing other games. They're playing Werewolf. They're playing, Vampire the Masquerade, etc.
Exactly. And AD&D itself had diversified into this huge product line that had kind of spread all their sales out. And so this is based on kind of interviews and conversations I've had with Ryan Dancy over the years, where basically his idea was that we need to produce less, because one of the problems TSR had that drove it into bankruptcy and allowed us to purchase the company was that they were just publishing too many things and spreading out their audience too much. And he said, what we need to do is figure out how to, but we still want to be able to support the game with adventures and stuff like that. We just can't support that with the overhead of a major company. And so he borrowed the concept of open source software and said, how can we take advantage of that in the gaming industry? And what he came up with his team was the Open Gaming License. And the basic precept behind the Open Gaming License is that Wizards of the Coast would create this system reference document that would have a subset of all the mechanics and some of the lore from D&D baked into the system reference document. And the Open Gaming License would allow you to access that content and also add your own open game content under the license, so anyone else using the license could use that open game content. And there was one other really cool and important provision of the Open Game License, which was product identity. And basically what we do is you could also declare product identity, which could be character names or kingdom names or your trademarks, for example. There was a lot of stuff that could be product identity, but the idea was it was kind of your IP. And so the example I like to use is if you were making like a Lord of the Rings role-playing game, for example, and you wanted to place under the Open Game License, but you wanted to make sure that Gandalf, for example, wasn't suddenly a public domain character that anybody could use. Product identity was a tool that you could say, no matter what I declare as open content, Gandalf is not open content. And so it gave you a nice backstop to make sure that whatever IP you really wanted to make sure you could protect, you could do it. And that was really essential as a publisher as a publisher of role-playing games, specifically for an open license. It's a tool that most open licenses don't have, because in a role-playing game, it's very difficult to separate out your IP from the other stuff you want to release. Like Gandalf needs a stat block, right? And so it's really difficult to like separate that out unless you have these specific tools.
So this is why if you publish an OGL product, you can't use a Beholder or Drizzt Do'Urden. And if you publish something using the Pathfinder rules, which are, again, on open gaming license, you can't use like Caden Kalen as a god or something like that, because that's part of the identity of Pathfinder. But you can absolutely use the Alchemist class.
And other people will choose not to place things under the under product identity, and they'll be much more open. You can use their setting elements and everything. It gives a lot of latitude of control, where you can be, as a publisher under the open game license, you can be very controlling, or you can be incredibly open. There's a lot of products out there. It's like everything's open. Have fun with it, And I've seen. Yeah,
I'm actually not sure. Caden Kalen may not even be protected. You could probably put it in. Right, I don't know. You could look it up.
Check those declarations, right?
When 3rd edition comes out, the open gaming license has these two concepts embedded. And then it also says, and correct me if I'm wrong on this, that this license is irrevocable. It will last forever. No one can take it away.
I'm going to defer to Legal Kimchi on exactly what the license says there.
It does not say that it's irrevocable. Okay. It does say it's perpetual. There are two distinct legal concepts there. Perpetual means that it will not turn off over time. Irrevocable means it's not able to be revoked by the party admitting the license or commissioning the license. So that's where the big difference is. Now, there is debate, and this is beyond me. I apologize.
No worries.
Because someone had asked me, well, I thought that revocation of a license wasn't even a concept in 2000 when this came out. To which I respond, I haven't been a lawyer that long. So I'm not quite that old. I've been a lawyer for many years. Not that many years. Okay. So I can't speak to the state of the law in 2000 as to whether or not irrevocable was considered a necessary term. Okay, because so much of the law is figuring out what is or is not a necessary term because somebody sued about it. So, and somebody apparently at some point made the argument that there is a difference between irrevocable and perpetual. When that argument was made, it was made before 2014. Because that's when I was licensed. So, and so that's where it gets a little tricky. But again, part of case law is, like I mentioned previously, that unless you provide a mechanism of revocation, then it isn't something that can be revoked. You'll notice in the new language, in the 1.1, that it is very explicit in that we can just take this back or change it, which is language that doesn't appear in the first one. The first one states that we may remedy it or revise it, okay? But it will still last. The new one is very much more specific, and looking at the difference in that language, to me, spells the intent.
There was actually a couple of things I've seen floating around I'd love to ask you about. One of which is the idea that it's really important to have that irrevocable in there if you don't have any other language about how it can be revoked. And I noticed that the OGL 1.0a has a termination clause that describes certain conditions under which it can be revoked. Is that actually significant, or is that just hearsay that's passing around the internet?
It's hard to say because, again, that's based on kind of 2000 language. So I think, see, this is where it gets into some testy waters, because perhaps I should have started by stating this. Nothing that Legal Kimchi is stating during this podcast should be construed as legal advice. I am not trying to establish an attorney-client relationship with anyone hearing this or who is participating in this interview.
I did put $1 in Legal Kimchi's pocket before this began. So,
whoa.
No, I'm just kidding.
Whoa.
I'm just kidding.
What?
Sorry, I saw that in Breaking Bad.
To paraphrase a completely different franchise, that's not how this works. That's not how any of this works.
The story of the week, the tagline of the week.
But so it's kind of hard for me to say specifically. To be perfectly honest with you, I'd have to be staring at the document and reviewing it rather in depth before I could say something definitive on that. You always want to err on the side of talking about it. We get paranoid because when you go through law school and you start reviewing cases, the reason you're reviewing the case is because something went wrong. You can win on weird technicalities. I have never seen people have more strong opinions about the Oxford comma than lawyers, because literally an Oxford comma has been the difference between millions of dollars. So anybody who's out there, like I saw Matt Colville one time in a video say, nobody cares about the Oxford comma. You know what you're talking about. To which I was like, you're not a lawyer. I care about the Oxford comma, and it has legal significance. Okay. And there's a trend in the legal field to try to use more colloquial language in contracts so that people can understand it. But we are set in our ways and we move like an iceberg. So there are words in there, and the litany of words, there's always a key indication. Because when you hear or read in a legal document, you cannot do, and it's like 10 different things that you think kind of mean the same thing. Like, we grant you a perpetual, worldwide, royalty-free, non-exclusive. All of those things are because somebody sued at some point about that word. So that's why that paragraph keeps getting bigger and bigger and bigger. So if you want it to be irrevocable, say that you want it irrevocable. You have to say it clearly, because if there's any level of ambiguity, then it falls into interpretation. And sometimes that's rolling the dice, because you never know how the court's going to unfold.
1.0 license is perpetual, but it is not irrevocable. It's up in the air for courts to decide whether it can be revoked. It seems like Wizards is coming down today on the side that it can be revoked.
I want to actually address something you said right there real quick.
Oh, yeah, sure.
Which is another question for Legal Kimchi about this revocability thing and the claim that Hasbro is seeking to revoke the license. Something I found interesting looking at the documents is that they don't actually ever use the word revoke. They're instead like dealing with this clause 9 out of the OGL version 1.0a, where they're dealing with authorizing versus deauthorizing licenses. I think that's really interesting, given that, like, if they aren't actually trying to revoke the license, if they're actually just trying to use like a clause within the license, is any of that revocability stuff even relevant to what they're trying to do?
Yeah, and I noticed that as well, because they're phrasing it under basically an update, a revision, okay? And the revision creates a new version, and the version is authorized, and the previous version is not authorized. It's tricky. That's where it gets tricky, okay? Because when I say the courts tend to, okay, and you'll always know when you're talking to an attorney, because they'll always use hedging language. It's how we talk. It annoys my wife. She's an attorney too, and we just annoy each other.
The door doesn't seem to be trapped.
Yeah, it's classic Dungeon Master.
The room appears to be empty.
But what they're trying to do is to go around the history of irrevocability of license. Okay, because while the wording isn't there, they know that they have to format an argument, okay? And that's why they're doing the updated version. Whether or not that floats, I mean, I've been in court cases where people try to float some very interesting arguments to get around established case law. Good luck. Good luck with that. You never know for certain when you go into a court case like that, but I wouldn't put any money down on that maintaining their ability.
Well, I think it's the interesting too is like, and the thing I get from like a lot of like we've seen, of course, a kind of people copy pasting articles and so forth and hot takes of various kinds, and a lot of the hot takes that rise to the top are the ones that like, oh, it's a done deal. The OGL version 1.0 was a terrible license. It was broken. They never should have written it this way. And I think the biggest takeaway I've gotten more than anything else is that that's not really true. Like, we aren't really sure what any of the answers are here, and it's not as simple as some people want to make it.
Yeah, and it never is. Okay. And like what people don't seem to understand about the legal profession, and I tweeted about this when this all happened, and some people misconstrued it because I tweeted, you have to be really careful with anyone making a statement about the validity of the license, the quality of the old license, whether or not it's revocable, whether or not the new one's going to hold up. Because number one, most of the people making these comments are not attorneys. Most of the people who are attorneys who are talking about this are not contract and IP attorneys. And even the contract attorneys, like me, can disagree. I have been in conversations, I've been in negotiations with other contract attorneys. We're talking companies with well-paid folks, with really fancy educations, talking about an exact same legal doctrine and coming with wildly different conclusions. Okay, everybody's going to have an opinion, and I mean, I've been in situations where I thought I walked into a courtroom and I was like, I'm going to lose this. And I won. And I've been in situations where I thought it was a slam dunk, and I'm scratching my head as I'm walking out of the courtroom. Is like, what just happened? Where am I? Okay, what backwoods story did I just fall out of where the courtroom decided that was actually what the law meant? You know, it happens. It happens all the time, and anybody who's out in the courtroom knows that. But you got a whole bunch of, online legal scholars and even attorneys who do in-house stuff. Okay? Because now I work for a company. I used to be out there, trying cases. And that's a different world. And I've been in a courtroom where attorneys wrote a contract that they thought was foolproof, and either me or the other side just looked at it and was, I'm just going to tear this apart. It happens. You have to be cautious about anyone saying that their opinion. And on top of that, anybody who says that this is a definite, that's a red flag for me. So when I tweeted that out, I was like, you have to be very cautious about anybody's opinion because, again, most are not attorneys. The ones who are don't work in contracts, and even the contract attorneys disagree. So even my opinion, you should take with a grain of salt. And it's my job.
Well, it sounds like we're all fucked.
Let's go back to a time when things were less uncertain.
Right, 2001. You walked into your local gaming store. The shelves were flooded with legends and lore, swords and sorceries, all kinds of OGL games, mutants and masterminds. Lots of them had ands in them. There were a lot of games. What was going on with the open game license after it came out?
Yeah, it was a fascinating time because, like, at the time, I'd been breaking into the RPG industry around this time, just about a couple of years before this. And as both a fan and a freelancer, there was a point there in 2000, like, oh, this is great. I'm going to actually like collect all the OGL stuff that comes out because I was a reviewer at the time. I'm going to collect all the OGL stuff. I'm going to review every OGL thing that comes out. And that seemed plausible in August of 2000. And by like, I don't know, December of 2000, it was like, I'm not going to be able to keep up with this at all. And then by mid-2001, it was literally impossible because the floodgates had opened. And it's partly because of the success of those early products. Like Atlas and Green Ronin did their thing. And then actually the thing was they published the PHB in August, the Dungeon Master's Guide in September, and the Monster Manual in October, if I recall correctly. And in September, between August when the PHB came out and the actual Monster Manual came out, White Wolf, under their Swords and Sorcery trademark, published the Creature Collection. They got a monster book, a whole monster book, like 200 pages plus of monsters, out onto the market before WotC got their Monster Manual onto the market. So the first monster book for third edition D&D that was commercially available was the Creature Collection from White Wolf Games. And that blew people's minds because that was unprecedented, of course. And that just brought in the floodgates of product and people doing things. And a lot of people talk about like, oh yeah, but there was so much crap. There was so much bad stuff. And I'm like, yeah, like Theodore Sturgeon said, like 90% of everything is crap, you know, like, but the great thing about the third party stuff was there was so much of it. There was just so much cream that was also rising to the top. It was a very exciting time as a gamer and as a D&D fan, to have all this amazing material that you could use, that any one of it could inspire you to do your next thing. And so that was all kind of humming along really well. But then like the Creature Collection is actually a bit of a canary in the coal mine, because the other thing that was happening was that Wizards of the Coast's intention had been to like pull back and focus on these evergreen products and let the third parties kind of like do their thing. But there was a couple of problems with that evergreen strategy. First, it didn't pan out. The evergreen books like the Epic Level Handbook and the Psionics Handbook didn't sell that well, or as well as they were hoping. And so they were actually relying more on the supplements that they wanted to do. But Wizards of the Coast was still publishing softcover black and white supplements. But the rest of the OGL, the third-party industry, pressured in competition with each other, were cranking their production values up. So while WotC was still publishing by like 2001, 2002 timeframe, they were still publishing black and white softcovers. The rest of the industry was suddenly publishing full-color hardcovers. And suddenly Wizards stuff that should be this premier quality stuff just looked cheap. And so in 2003, they rebooted D&D as the 3.5 rule set. And everything I've heard is that a major reason for this was they needed to be able to reboot their supplement line. Because when 3.5 came out, they were able to like say, okay, all those old black and white books, they don't matter anymore. Here's our new full color hardcovers that will compete with what the third party publishers are doing in the marketplace. But the way they handled that, I think one thing to really focus on here in this history is the rug pulls. And this is actually the first rug pull by WotC, because before 3.5 came out, they had a whole bunch of marketing being like, hey, these new core rulebooks that are coming out, they're going to be completely backwards compatible with 3.0. And if that word sounds really familiar from like the marketing of the last 6 months, it's why us at Atlas were already a little bit nervous going into all this. It's going to be completely backwards compatible. Keep buying our stuff. Keep buying other people's stuff, because it's going to be completely compatible with the new edition. Because we want you to keep buying the books we have in the production pipeline, right? But as soon as 3.5 came out, marketing gets flipped. And suddenly it's, 3.0, that's the old crap. Anything that's compatible with 3.0 is completely useless. Don't buy our old books, buy the new ones. But that floods out into the third party as well. And so what they're telling people is all these books that the third party publishers who WotC had told, no, it's all going to be backwards compatible. It's going to be fine. Keep producing your books. They had books that were in development. They had books that were printing. They had books that were shipping. And suddenly their customers were being told, all those books are worthless. Don't buy them. And publishers began going out of business. And it wasn't just the publishers, it was the local game stores too. Local game stores had been told, just keep buying the 3.0 stuff because it'll still be compatible. We're telling people to buy it. But then as soon as 3.5 came out, all their customers were being told, that stuff's crap. Leave it on the shelf. And so these game stores had all this capital invested in dead product that they now couldn't move. And game stores went out of business as a result. And so as rug pulls go, this was a fairly minor one, but it was a significant one. And what was now referred to as the D20 bubble had popped. And a lot of people went out of business. And local game stores became a lot more suspicious of carrying third-party products from that point forward, because they had gotten burned once by this whole process. And then I guess we can go rug pull to rug pull. The next rug
pull number 2.
Rug pull number 2. Rug pull number 2 is fourth edition. And I guess the short history here is that leadership changes at Hasbro basically passed down dictates to the whole company, not just Wizards of the Coast, but the whole company, that there were going to be two types of brands. There were going to be core brands that made $50 million or more, and there were going to be non-core brands that made less than $50 million. And core brands would get investments of marketing and budget and everything else, and non-core brands wouldn't. And in fact, some of those non-core brands would basically be mothballed, and maybe they'd come back later for a nostalgia push later and see if maybe they could succeed later. The problem was D&D wasn't a $50 million brand. It was like a $30 million brand at the time. And so what the D&D team at Wizards of the Coast was looking at was like, well, we're all going to be fired. D&D might actually go out of print. They might mothball it and be like, we'll let it lay for a bit. Let the video games do their thing. We'll bring it back later. So they came up with a plan that would let them hopefully save D&D. And their plan was, we're going to drastically increase revenues. And we're going to do that by launching a virtual tabletop and a digital character creator and selling digital subscriptions so we can collect subscription money just like an MMO. And again, if this sounds really eerily familiar...
Wait a second.
Wait a moment. So they're doing all that. And the other thing they're also doing at the same time is that they're also clawing back all these licenses. And this includes not just what they do with the OGL, which we'll get to in a second, but also they had third-party licenses at this time. They had licensed Dungeon & Dragon magazine to Paizo Publishing. That's how Paizo Publishing got their start. The Dragonlance setting had been licensed to Margaret Weis Productions. Right. Ravenloft was being published by White Wolf. They had a whole bunch of these different licenses that were out there, and all of those systematically got, they chose not to renew them or they canceled them as they went. At the time, One Bookshelf was had a program where they sold D&D PDFs officially the same way they do today. That license was actually was canceled in, I believe, 2008, right around the time 4th edition was coming out. That one was kind of infamous because they didn't tell anybody about it. They were just like, hey, actually, we're canceling it now. So turn it all off and nobody can download the PDFs they bought anymore. So there was a lot of outrage over that. And then as far as the OGL went, they were not going to continue supporting the OGL. And so they said, we're going to release this new license. But it wasn't quite that simple because they knew people wouldn't be very happy. So they spent a long time kind of hemming and hawing about what the plan was going to be. They issued press releases where they were like, well, we are continuing to support the creation of third-party content. We think it's really important. We'll have more details down the line. We really hope no one leaks our copy of the GSL, which at the time they didn't. There was a point in this where they were like, actually, you know what? How about if you're a publishing company, you can pay us $5,000 and we will give you early access to the playtest material. And people were like, okay, but what's the terms of the license going to be? And they were like, well, if you pay us the $5,000, we will definitely tell you what those terms will be after you've paid that to see the material. And people were like, no. So they dropped that plan, and there was a whole bunch of this stuff going on. But eventually 4th edition did release. They didn't use the OGL. They used this new license, and 4th edition did its own thing for a while. But of course, at the same time, there was this rug pull. And one of the major rug pulls was for Paizo Publishing. They'd had their Dungeon & Dragon magazine licenses canceled, but they still had the subscription lists. So they began publishing the Pathfinder Adventure Path, which was a monthly magazine, basically, to continue their subscription services. And they were publishing adventure paths in there. And those adventure paths took them about a year to go from development to publication to delivery. And so they said, Wizards, we need to know, if you're going to move to 4th edition, we'd love to continue supporting the new edition, but we need to know what that is so that we can begin making our plans for what the adventure path will be. And part of WotC's hemming and hawing was they just didn't tell Paizo what that was going to be. And as it became increasingly apparent that the terms of the license were going to be very non-friendly regardless, Paizo switched plans. And the plan they switched to was the Pathfinder role-playing game, which was basically a slightly updated version of 3rd edition that would remain actually compatible with 3rd edition. And Pathfinder, of course, still exists today in its 2nd edition down the road. And that was the major sort of bifurcation between Pathfinder and Wizards, was as a direct result of that second rug pull in 2008.
Second rug pull, it doesn't revoke or cancel in any way OGL 1.0, but it issues this new game systems license, which very few people used, was not super friendly to third-party creators, was much more restrictive. Am I getting that right?
That's right. I'm not really a huge expert on the specific terms of the GSL because at the time, I looked at it 15 years ago now when it came out, and I said, that's too restrictive. I'm not going to publish under it. Nor did any of the publishers I was working with. None of them wanted to publish under either. So I looked at it long enough 15 years ago to be like, oh, well, I mean, and one of the big things that made it completely untenable all by itself was that it was revocable at whim by Wizards of the Coast. And that's just non-tenable if you're a publishing company. You can't go into any kind of product development cycle. Like we just talked about Paizo's development cycle. It takes them a year to do an adventure path. Well, if you're in the middle of doing a year's worth of adventure path where you're paying people and investing money and all of that, you can't have halfway through that somebody else unilaterally say, you've got 30 days because you'll go out of business. Like, the margins aren't that great. And like, you know, like the Pangea setting that Atlas is doing right now, where we're getting rug pulled now with it. You know, that's been an 18-month development cycle from when we first started working with David Somerville on the project to now that it's actually at the printers and being fulfilled. And if at any point in there, they're like, oh, 30 days, you can't publish that. You know, we're screwed. Our customers are screwed. It's just a screw job all the way down.
That's a feature. That's not a bug. You know, that like the whole idea behind having a termination clause in the license like that is basically that the GSL and to an extent the 1.1 is a slightly commercialized fan content policy. You know, it's not it's very much intended to chill a company from doing it. They kind of want to have the cake and eat it too. They want to be able to have Joe in his garage making his PDF D&D adventure because he's not going to make that much money off of it. He's not making $1 million off of this thing. He's just, you know, doing stuff for fun in his hobby time. They're fine with that. They're trying to specifically prevent things like Paizo with that type of terminology.
So after all this unpleasantness in 4th edition, the 5th edition game comes out with, I believe, what's called OGL 1.0A.
I'll stop you there.
Sure,
actually,
yeah,
that goes around quite a bit, and that's not actually accurate. So 1.0A. Actually, that license was released back in 2000. The license for 5th edition is the same license that was used for 3rd edition and the same license that was used for 3.5. Okay, here's a little thing, little history on this. So basically, before 3rd edition came out, they were working with publishers like Atlas and Green Ronin, for example, and they didn't have the final legal text for the Open Gaming license. So if you go way back in like archive.org and look at the Open Gaming Foundation, you can find a text for 0.02 of the license, and that version of the license was a development license that let Alice and Green Ronin and others begin developing content with confidence. And the way they controlled access to those is that the Open Gaming license 1.0 requires you to publish the license in the book when you publish it, but the license is copyrighted by Wizards. And in the final version of the license itself is made open content so that you can publish it under the open content license. Okay. But the development license is 0.02, there was a 0.03, and I think a 0.04 as well. Those licenses were still copyrighted by Wizards, weren't made open content, and you had to go to them and get permission to publish them in your book, which was their way of maintaining control on unfinished legal documents, right? Because if they didn't give you permission to publish your book under the license, you couldn't put the license in there, and the terms of the license couldn't be taken advantage of. So there's these really old ones that are these sort of like pre-release ones that were used by companies for development. So if you go back, you can find some books that were using these really old ones. And then when the game came out, or shortly thereafter, in late August or early September of 2000, 1.0, no A, just 1.0 was actually released. And then I believe it was October of 2000, but don't 100% quote me on that, but like within about a month or two, 1.0A came out. And the difference there is that 1.0 in clause 7 said trademark. And in 1.0A it said trademark or registered trademark. And that's the only difference between the two of them.
Okay. Wow.
Yeah, I know they got a little like I really nitpicky, but yeah. So anyways, the big story is 1.0A is the same license, which is why you can see people use open content from back then in their 5th edition books even now. Okay,
so 5th edition, when 5th edition comes out, we're back to the way things were done on 3rd edition. 4th edition's forgotten. This is open game license, third-party creators, independent creators, go nuts, make your own D&D supplements, settings, and adventures. Have fun with it. So that's where we've been for, I guess, I don't know, the past 8 or 9 years, right?
Yeah, the 5th edition SRD came out in, I believe, January 2016. So 5th edition came out in late 2014. At the time, they were saying it would be released in 2015, but I'm pretty sure the SRD didn't actually come out till January 2016. So we've been under the new regime for pretty much almost exactly 7 years now.
And so I guess we're back to today, where we've been, hearing now for the past 4 or 5 months about 1D&D And, there have been these rumors about the license and that it might change. And until Linda's reporting, we didn't really know whether those were true or not. And, now we do. Now we've all read this leaked version. I just want to ask you both some kind of big questions about this. If we had to speculate, why? Just why make this change to a system that seems to be working? Like, D&D is so popular, it's so profitable. Why are they reversing course?
To me, this is an indication of regime change and people who are coming from a different world. Because you have a new executive team coming in from, Amazon, Microsoft?
I think both is the case. Different people are from...
Yeah, different people from different areas. And they're trying to engage in modern monetization techniques that have worked in SaaS or software as a service operations or other technology-driven operations that they want to translate into a pen and paper game. Now, how do you do that? You transition it into a software as a service. What is one D&D with this virtual tabletop, the purchase of D&D Beyond, but a transition from a paper and pencil game and product to a software as a service? And the software as a service model is something that is a known cash cow in any industry that's been implemented in. Okay? You look at microtransactions in video games. You look at business-to-business transactions. Most people don't understand the business-to-business transactions that happen between companies, but a lot of it is just cloud-based computing that happens over Amazon's web services or the Azure cloud or the Google cloud. This is what I deal with in my day job, so this is something that I'm very keenly aware of. And as a person who works on SaaS technology contracts and things like that, it reads to me like they're doing that. And what they don't seem to get is that that's not how any of this works in this particular field.
Have you ever played a role-playing game before, sir? And
so, even something where it's a computer role-playing game, something like World of Warcraft, or things of that nature, it does not operate in the same manner as a pen and paper game service. Okay? But it's not something that's unique to Wizards of the Coast either. You see other companies trying to transition a little bit into that, dip their toes into it. You see Games Workshop with a streaming service.
Yeah.
What is a tabletop miniatures game doing creating a streaming service? They're trying to tap into, Netflix and all of these other companies. SaaS is the wave of the future. SaaS is how businesses make money. And they're trying to shoehorn in SaaS product into a incompatible industry. This makes sense if you have that mentality of this is how we made tons of money at Microsoft. This is how we made tons of money at Amazon. All we have to do is digitize this pen and paper product. Let's get it into the future. Let's make it now. Let's make it part of today and tomorrow. You can almost hear the corporate lingo and buzzwords when I see products being announced of this nature, and they see other people making money by doing little bits of it, without understanding that it's probably not as profitable as they think, and that it's helping them as opposed to hurting them that other people are doing this. Okay. And so it's I think it's that it's trying to learn a new language and not getting the idioms, Because if I say to somebody who's learning English, don't look a gift horse in the mouth, they have no idea what I'm talking about and don't get the context of the phrase because they're not a native fluent speaker. If you bring somebody in from another industry like that, they could, they could be a disruptor. Let's use those buzzwords again. They could disrupt the industry, or they could fall flat on their face because they have no idea what they're doing. And I think this is one of the latter. I've worked in huge companies. I've worked in companies that are larger than the tabletop industry. Okay? I've worked in companies that make much more money than the entire tabletop industry.
What industry could that possibly be? I don't.
Every other industry. Okay, all right, you've got us. You've got us.
Okay, and I was just put, on one hand, we give some of these corporations too much credit. We think of these things, oh, they're playing like 4D chess. No, they're not. They're trying to make money, and they're doing what they know. Okay, and if you give them a hammer, they're going to try to hammer it, regardless. It's the classic to hammer everything as a nail. That's what this is in a corporate scale.
Well, I mean, there's it's the two paradigms, right? Like, and if talking about open gaming specifically, you can view it through two lenses. And the lens in which it was created, the Ryan Dancey lens, the lens that I'm completely on board with because Ryan Dancey turned me into a convert like 20 years ago, is that like what you're doing is you have this mass, this mass of third-party creators who are creating far more content than you ever could and addressing incredibly specific niches of content that a company like Wizards could never actually do because, the margins of what they're doing there sometimes just is like, it's not even profitable at all. It's just a hobbyist doing it for you. But all of those niches, as you're filling those in from those third-party contents, they flow back into the game. They're the things that keep people playing 5th edition rather than moving on to some other game. Because 5th edition is satisfying their needs, because there is all this huge community satisfying all these needs in the form of their game. But the other paradigm, the paradigm that I think the new leadership sees is, well, all these companies are stealing money from us. Like MCDM is stealing money from us. Paizo is stealing money from us. That's money that would be spent on us if it wasn't being spent on their games. And those are the two paradigms. The irony, though, I think, talk about SAS and software as services. I think there actually is, a model in software and video games, at least, where Wizards could be getting their cut of this and nobody would be objecting at all. And that's the Steam model, where if they had a digital storefront and they said, hey, all you third-party publishers, come list your products on the official D&D third-party store, OGL, whatever, and we'll take a 30 or 35 or 40% cut. We'd all sign up for that. You want to do digital distribution for us and take a 40% cut on the official site? Yeah, we all win. But that, like you said, that's not the paradigm they want to work with. They're in a different mindset.
Right. The line of the new leaked draft that stood out to me was like, OGL wasn't intended to fund major competitors. It's like, is that how they really see, like, Paizo, which is just such a immensely smaller company and sales to D&D? I was just blown away by that.
They have you have these leadership changes, and we're at least 3 leadership changes away from people who were at the company in 4th edition and experienced the failures of 4th edition, right? And like I say that, sometimes people are like, oh, you just hate 4th edition. I'm not talking about the game at all. I'm talking about the actual like marketing and sales of the game and its ability to succeed at its goals. And so you removed from those mistakes. So there's one point where you're like, okay, well, maybe some of those lessons, those hard lessons learned, have been forgotten. But I think on the other hand, I think there is also a degree to which they look back at 4th edition and some of the things that happened around 4th edition's launch, and they think, well, we can get away with that if we just do it better. We just need to call the license the Open Game License instead of the Game System License. That'll solve it. And we need to we'll wait until, this is me being pessimistic in my cynicism for projection now. But, our mistake last time was canceling all the third-party licenses before the new edition came out. We'll wait until after the new edition comes out. We'll wait 6 months or a year, and then we won't renew the DM's Guild license. We won't renew the other VTT licenses, because by that point, we'll have already gotten people transitioned into the new edition. And so I think this leak is probably like their worst nightmare in some respects.
Yeah, just to build on that, like what do we all think will happen? What do we think Wizards' response to this community backlash will be?
I'll bite the bullet on that one.
All right.
Based on my experience, I am extremely cynical, and I think that they will continue doing fundamentally what they want to do. Like, I think the best case scenario we can hope for at this point is that they do issue a statement saying, hey, we weren't actually trying to revoke 1.0a. We don't think that's possible. Our bad. But pretty much everything else will actually stay the way it is. I think that's the best case scenario I can imagine. And I don't necessarily think that's what we're going to get.
I think it's something similar. I think that they're going to try to wait it out and wait out the fervor that has grown because of the online community. The online community is only a fraction of the D&D community.
Yeah, we say this all the time. D&D Twitter is
right.
Not even the whole group of people who make role-playing games, and definitely the smallest fraction of the people who play role-playing games.
The weird, unique thing about D&D Twitter, though, is that you're much more likely, in my opinion, to be a dungeon master in D&D Twitter because you are that sort of alpha gamer. You're the overly enthusiastic person in your group if you're engaging in D&D Twitter. I mean, I'm a forever GM, and every single person I know in D&D Twitter is a forever GM, and because we're the ones who want to put in that extra effort to make worlds, and we're the ones who shop for these products. We're the ones who are looking for the third-party products and these little supplements and this, that, and the other thing. So we aren't the juggernaut of the entire industry, but a lot of us are the people who spend an inordinate amount of our spare change on this stuff. So there is something to be said for the influence that it can have. But, I mean, any sort of Twitter mob does not have an intense amount of stamina. How quickly we forget. Wizards know that. I mean, how quickly did we forget what they did with 4th edition? Everybody was back on the Wizards hype train when 5th edition came out. Okay. And it feels like Battlestar Galactica. All of this has happened before. All of it will happen again.
So say we all.
So say we all.
Great show. Justin's here telling us the story, and we're all like, wow, that's a parallel. Wow, that's a parallel. Wow, that's a parallel. It happened. We all forgot about it. And we did it again. And that's what they're banking on.
I mean, this is just the history of the OGL, too. This cycle with D&D goes even further back. One of the reasons people got turned off to TSR in the early 90s was TSR, when the internet started up and people began like coming onto the internet in a major way, people started sharing their creations and stuff. And after about a year of that or so, I'm not a super big expert in this history. I've just lived it, but it's been a while. But like TSR came out and we're like, we're going to sue everybody. If you post your stuff online, if you post it to Usenet, if you share it with people, we're going to sue you. And people were like, well, flip the table. Let's go play something else. And that again wasn't the whole fan base, but it did impact the relationship between the company and the people. And that took a bankruptcy and a new company taking over before they could begin winning people back again.
Yeah, even prior to that, Gary Gygax is kind of famous for, in the early days of D&D, being like, ooh, some kids out in California made a new class. Let's see if we can put that in the game. And, oh, there's this guy who has this fantasy setting over there. Let's bring that into the game. And then, 4 years later being like, if it's not an official TSR licensed product, then it's not officially in the game and we're going to sue you. Like, the cycle keeps happening, okay? You could say it's a systemic issue, endemic of the economic structure of it. Let's not go down that road. But it's something that's, it's happened before. It'll probably happen again. And it's a question of who's going to be around when it happens. Because I was there when the 3rd edition to 4th edition transition happened. I was there when the 2nd edition to 3rd edition transition happened, and even I feel surprised that it happened again. Almost in the sense of like, really? They're going to try this one again? I didn't even think that was in the cards. So,
well, the new edition's fascinating because the people who announced and said we're going to do this new edition in 2024, the people who actually initiated that project in terms of leadership, not the designers, but in terms of leadership, they're actually gone. And so I think, this is me reading from the outside. I don't have any privileged inside knowledge of this. But from the outside, it seemed like the idea was, we're going to make a game. We're just going to lightly update the new rule books as a celebration of the 50th anniversary of the game. But that project got created. It got a budget inside the company, and then new leadership came in. And so, like, when that kind of thing happens in a company, when the original intention disappears with the people who had it, it's difficult to know what that intention is going to change into by the time the project actually comes out the door. So,
and I've worked in a company, a major like Fortune 500 company, where I saw a shift in the leadership, in the executive leadership of the company, nearly tear down almost 100 years of ethical business practices, where I'm sitting there in this company. It was like, I thought I was going to retire here. I don't know if I'm going to last a year here. Not because they're going to let me go or I'm going to get fired, but I can't stand the stench. I've seen it happen. It happens to established, reputable companies that people trust all the time outside of the tabletop industry. And I'm not surprised to see something like that happen inside of the tabletop industry. I'm not going to be apocalyptic doomsaying and saying this is the death knell of D&D. No, it'll probably subside a little bit and then it'll come back. D&D is huge to a scale that folks don't get. Okay? If you take the next biggest publisher, put them next to D&D, it's kind of like putting the American military against any other country. It's hilariously outgunned, right? Even if you put them all together, they wouldn't equal. They might be annoying, but it's not the same. So it is and it isn't the industry. You know what I mean? It is, but it isn't. And, there's a reality business-wise that we have to understand about it. I don't think it's going anywhere, but it's an ebb and flow.
What do you all think this is going to mean? And I know we've got to move to our closing thoughts here for like third-party publishers of various levels, for like bigger, products like Pathfinder or Dungeon World, or bigger companies like Cobalt Press or Atlas Games, down to like, small folks who just, okay, I make this one thing. I raised $20,000 on Kickstarter, or I just did this on my own time. Like, what do you think's the effect going to be on the kind of range of third-party D&D creators?
Well, I guess speaking from inside the industry, I think you make a good point, which is that third-party creators are a lot of different things. And so to start with something I have first-hand knowledge of with Atlas Games. So Atlas Games has published for a long time third-party content for D&D under the various licenses. But that is not all we do. We have a whole bunch of other role-playing games that we do. Magical Kitty Save the Day, Unknown Armies, Feng Shui, Ars Magica, Over the Edge. So we have always been a company that is diversified, not just in the role-playing industry, we also have a ton of board games and card games, like Bloom, for example. And so part of this also depends on what actually is the outcome of this. If WotC backs off and the OGL 1.0a continues in effect in some sense, or if like hallelujahs have sung from heaven and they're like, actually, you know what? We're gonna publish under 1.08. Forget the whole thing.
Sorry.
We would certainly look at like continuing to support things through the 1.08. The 1.1 and anything even remotely like the 1.1, we touched on this earlier, is not something a professional company like Atlas can touch with a 10-foot pole. It's just antithetical to actually being in business. Not just in terms of those production times we're talking about, but like publishers tend to like stay alive based on our long tail sales. Like things that we built 5 years ago are still selling a little bit, and they're all selling enough to keep us, in healthcare.
So it's not like the royalties thing is obviously another insult to injury, but maybe not even the biggest part of this.
Oh, well, yeah. It's the termination clause is the biggest thing. The royalty thing is, we didn't really touch on this, but the royalty thing
there's so much here.
Is actually, the thing is, so the thing I understand about the royalties and the way they work is, we'll simplify it down to, at $750,000 of annual revenue from OGL derived income, which is only kind of defined. you have to start paying a 25% royalty above that. There's a couple of provisos and stuff, but just looking at that. The thing is that means that if your total revenue, not just from one book or one project, but from your entire company of OGL stuff, hits $750,000 in a year, then everything past that gets that 25% added to it. But that means that, like, in order for you to make any money on things you sell past $750,000 in revenue, you have to have a margin on it, a profit margin on it, of at least 25% of whatever you're charging for it. And so as a publisher, as a professional publisher, for example, when we publish a book, we sell it to a distributor, and we generally get 35 to 40% of the cover price off of that. And then we have to pay to print it, ship it from the printer, ship it to the distributors. We also have to pay the writers and the artists and all those people. And a typical RPG book that's like a huge success for most companies gets to like 5 figures. And that's not a large enough scale to get particularly good margins on published books, big, thick published books, right? They're heavy to ship. There's a lot of words in them we have to pay for. There's a lot of art that we pay for them. And so the margins, most companies don't have 25% margins on the things they sell. That, I think that the typical, across all industries, the typical margin is like 10 to 15% is considered to be pretty good. So the thing is, like, so once you as a company reach $750,000 in annual revenue, which is an incredibly tiny company, like, that sounds like a lot of money if you're just an individual in your basement. That's great. But like, as a company with like employees to pay and healthcare to pay and a warehouse to support, that's nothing. It's nothing at all. So as soon as you hit that, you're at a stage where you probably start losing money on every copy of your game that you sell, which is, of course, again, completely untenable for a business. And so you have this situation where, in many ways, the license is almost a honeypot. Where if you're a naive neophyte getting into the business for the first time, it's really easy to think $750,000. I could never do that. And so you're like, I might as well sign up. But the reality is that, yeah, okay, sure, many people who sign up will never actually have that level of success. But some of you will be the next Matthew Colville or the next Matthew Mercer or any one of the other YouTube creators and Patreon creators who haven't, in fact, struck it big. And not just through like one big Kickstarter potentially, but just through a successful Patreon, for example. And those are the people that the license is designed to lure them in, get them committed to the license because there's no way out. And then where do you go from that? You either get shut down because WotC doesn't want to deal with you, or you're forced to sign some kind of additional license with WotC on their terms, whatever they decide to dictate, because you don't have another option. Because at that point, you're far enough in. What are you going to do? So it's a very ugly license for any kind of actual professional business, and one that I don't think we've actually said this. I am not a lawyer. None of us are your lawyer. None of us can give you legal advice. But my professional advice is that no one should sign this license. Like, there's no one this license is a good deal for. So, like, Atlas Games will never publish anything under the 1.1 as it currently exists. It would have to be radically revised to be a license that makes any kind of professional sense.
Sorry, I haven't had time to even digest this, but I saw that other third-party publishers have already announced that, yes, we're not going to do this. We're making our own system. Several major companies have already announced this, like, today, so...
I've seen MCDM say that. I've seen Cobalt Press has said that. I know that Paizo Publishing, just before we started recording this, had gone live with an announcement that they're going to be investigating an alternative open license of some kind that people can sign up for. I saw that Chaosium had actually just issued a press release saying that they're going to be joining in on whatever open license Paizo's open license initiative comes up with. My guess, this is based again on nothing, but my guess is you'll probably see MCDM and Cobalt Press also sign up with that open license. I don't think that means these systems are going to unify in any way. I'm talking about just the legal license. You're seeing a bunch of different systems rise up, and you're also seeing, I think, what will probably end up being a separate license structure as well that people feel more secure in.
It's actually larger than that. And yeah, this just happened right beforehand with Paizo's announcement. But Chaosium, Cobalt Press, Green Ronin, Legendary Games, Rogue Genius Games are already on board with Paizo on this Orc license. Love it already. It is they're calling it the Open RPG creative license, orc.
License.
I love it.
I love
Hell
orcs.
yeah.
Orcs are my favorite. Orcs are my favorite. I made a 45-minute video defending orcs. Anyway, get rid of your bioessentialism. I love orcs. I love.
Hell
Anyway, and none of the companies control the license. That's the interesting thing about the announcement to me, is that the license is actually held by a law firm, and all of them are just signing up to make sure that their products are a part of this license and can be utilized under this open license. So even the companies don't have the power to change it because it's not technically their license. It's a fascinating idea.
The other interesting thing about this initiative too is that the attorney who is working on it is actually the attorney who helped draft the original open game license back in 2000.
Yes, it's his law firm, and he's doing it. So the one part of the statement that I thought was great was like, we believe the interpretation of the OGL 1.0A was intended to be irrevocable. With good reason. We were there. Oh, boy. Mic drop. But yeah, it's absolutely fascinating. And it's one of those things where, from a smaller creator standpoint, okay, because I can't speak to, like Atlas Games and third-party publishing. You saw the effects that it has. But on the YouTuber aspect, I'm in a bunch of Discords with a bunch of other YouTubers. By the way, they're all as cool as you think. Go follow their channels. But and every one of them, big ones, the ones with 6-figure subscriber counts, the ones like me, all of them are like, we can't do it. Because what if, and it's disrespecting the industry. And as a respect and a sign of solidarity against people who are making their livings as companies that do this, they're like, look, one of two things. One, we're showing solidarity. And two, what if one of our products does get big? We're with the algorithm being what it is, we could be shooting up in subscriber count. Our Patreon just starts to explode. And guess what? Our Patreon starts getting to a point we're starting to inch up to a solid number, a livable wage. Maybe we can quit our jobs. Oh no, Wizards just lowered the $750,000 cap to $50,000.
Or they crank the royalty up, or they just cancel it altogether, right?
Or they cancel it altogether. Who knows? And that level of uncertainty has a chilling effect even to hobbyists, because look, even hobbyists in our heart of hearts want to, be able to walk into work one day and be like, you know what? I'm done. I'm making RPG adventures. Good night. Because this is where our passions are. Okay. For
the record, that's a really good day when it comes from the other side of that threshold. It's a really nice day. Someday.
If my employer is watching, not anytime recently, I'm just kidding. No, but, it does have a chilling effect, even on the hobbyists. So you're probably going to see, especially in the short term, I would predict a wasteland of noncompliance because no one wants to go in. And then a slight trickle of ignorant or naive, and that's not an insult. It's just they don't know. Folks who are like, maybe I can get in on this. And they go forth and release their products and all that sort of stuff. But the high quality stuff, the professional stuff, the stuff from the experienced developers, the stuff from people who have been doing it, you won't see it there. And with this orc license that's coming out, and I love saying that every time, you're probably going to see more people go, why not? Why not dabble the toe in there? And I know that there are attorneys out there who will make the argument that the OGL is meaningless. You can't copyright game mechanics. You can make compatible things to D&D regardless of the OGL. But the security of the OGL, the comfort and stability that it offered, is palpable. Okay? It's almost tangible. Because do you want to make something that could be construed as a lawsuit? Even if you win. Or do you want to work in a playground where you know you won't get sued? That's the difference. Okay, regardless of what copyright law says. Because if you need someone like me to be a part of your project to make sure that you're complying with copyright law, you've already lost.
You're too expensive, legal kimchi. You're too expensive.
And that's the thing. That's the mentality that I think is so frustrating when I see an attorney out there going, well, you don't even need the OGL. What's the point? You know, you're not violating any copyright law. Well, that's great. You know that. I know that. They don't know that.
Well, it's overly simplistic too, because yes, there is stuff in the SRD that is a pure game mechanic that yes, sure, you could get away with copyright, but to pretend, I mean, this goes back to something you talked about too, and certainly your expertise is better than mine. But to pretend that the issues of what exactly copyright law is around role playing games is some fully settled thing that you can make definitive pronouncements about is a delusion, because it's not. It's never been tested in court. And there's a lot of things unique to role-playing games that raises legitimate copyright questions that nobody actually knows the answer to.
Exactly.
And even if you believe that nothing in the WotC SRD is copyrightable, which I don't think is true, the thing about the OGL is it creates an entire ecosystem of content that is shared by everybody. And so there's tons of content in that ecosystem, which is definitely not something you can use without copyright. And that's part of why the nuclear bomb of we're going to just turn it all off is so heartbreaking, is that it doesn't just affect WotC's SRD. It affects 23 years of thousands of creators contributing to a Creative Commons that we all share in, both as creators and as audience members benefiting from that. And WotC wants to burn that Creative Commons to the ground. And although were the ones who started that Creative Commons, and although you can argue that they provide great value by the existence of D&D to that commons is not theirs. There's a lot of copyright material dwarfing anything Wizards has ever produced in terms of quantity that has been created by other people and donated to that Creative Commons that does not belong to Wizards and will not belong to Wizards no matter what action they take. And that's the thing that makes me furious is that act of vandalism on the industry that they're trying to push.
So I guess we can kind of end, at least my final thought is one that is kind of positive, because as you both said, there's like incredible solidarity among people who make role-playing games and the people who enjoy those creators' work. Lots of people, like you said, are signing on to these new licensing ideas. There are a ton of people canceling their D&D Beyond subscription to send a message to WotC that they don't like this. So, you know, I'm not saying this, well, what if this is actually good for RPGs? But, you know, this is actually, you know, it could be, there could be some positives here. And I know at least one of them is solidarity among people who try and do this for a living or for fun. And that's great to see. You'll love to see it.
I think that D&D Beyond thing is really important to call attention to as well. Linda Codega had some reporting today, and the reporting is really great and has been very reliable throughout. They're saying that they have sources inside WotC that are telling them what they're watching are the D&D Beyond numbers. And so if you're as outraged, or even half as outraged as I am, and you feel comfortable like wanting to send a message to WotC, it seems like the best way to do that right now is D&D Beyond. And that actually is something that's true now that was not true in 2008 with the last rug pull, is that in 2008, Wizards of the Coast did not have any mechanism where they could immediately see a hit on their revenue as a result of the actions they were taking, and that's no longer true. Like, if they're able to see those D&D Beyond cancellations in real time, and so they're able to see immediately. They don't have to wait 6 months and release the GSL and release 4th edition, then be like, oh, we made a mistake. They can see right now, if you send that message, they can see that message. And so as cynical as I am, that is a big difference from those previous rug pulls we talked about, and it could make a difference if that solidarity comes through.
Well, that's actionable cynicism. Use that cynicism to do something about it.
I might have to make actionable cynicism t-shirts as my personal brand.
Trademark.
I will license that phrase to you on an open license. No, just kidding.
As long as you don't deauthorize it on me, it'll be fine.
I'll give both of y'all the final word. Any other random thoughts or things you want to tell other dungeon masters and role-playing game players and creators?
There's so much out there, and you can get lost in it. But even if you just go out and find one other game and dig into it, you might not know what you're missing. because I am a lifelong D&D player. I learned how to read because of those source books back in the second edition. The first edition Monster Manual. I have collector's books from OD&D. Okay, like the Greyhawk supplement. I literally have a Greyhawk supplement under my desk over there. I'm a second generation player. My dad was playing even before I was, and I don't know of a time that I will ever really stop playing D&D. And even if I do, I will always have an appreciation for what it is and how it got me into the hobby and how much I love this hobby. That being said, it might not be the best game. There are other games out there, and it's scary to try to reach out and find some sort of game and, giant rule books and learning a whole new system and all that. And I get that. Just try one. See if you like it. Might blow your mind. I have very rarely seen a person get disappointed by the second role-playing game they play. The 10th maybe, but the second but I have every single time I've introduced the second role-playing game to somebody, there's this spark of like, we can do that too? And it's fantastic. It'll improve your D&D games. Even if you go back to D&D.
That's right.
Okay? It'll make it better. Try one other game.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, with or without D&D, we are living in a golden age of role-playing games. There are so many options out there. If you went back and told 10-year-old Justin in 1989, just getting into role-playing games, what the options would be in the future, would have blown his mind. Because back then, you could actually, you could know every single game that existed. And so it's a completely different world now. And it's kind of like, what are the odds that the first movie you ever watched is actually your favorite movie, is actually the best movie you will ever see? And that's not a slight against the first movie you saw. Maybe the first movie you saw was Star Wars or
Empire Strikes Back, literally.
Right.
Empire Strikes Back.
Maybe a fantastic movie, but the odds that specific movie is the best movie you will ever see are kind of low, even if it's a great movie. And so like Legal Kimchi said, I'm a huge D&D fan. I've always been a huge D&D fan. I go with except for a few years in the 90s when I was going through an emo phase. So I've always been a huge D&D fan.
There's other games,
but there's other games, and it's very worthwhile to find those other experiences. For the same reason, it's worthwhile watching other movies, reading other books, playing other board games.
I want to say thank you both for your expertise and your insight into what's going on here. And Justin, I'll just start with you. Where can people find you and your work?
Well, you can find me online. My primary home of residence online is the Alexandrian. It's the alexandrian.net. It's become a haven for game mastery tips and tricks and that kind of thing. And of course, I'm also the RPG producer at Atlas Games, which is atlas-games.com, where we publish board games and card games and a wide variety of role-playing games if you are in fact looking for a new one to try out.
Hell yeah. If you're not reading The Alexandrian for Dungeon Master advice, you are missing out. Thank you again. And Legal Kimchi, where can folks find you?
Likewise. You can find me at youtube.com/legalkimchi. I make video essays on TTRPG and geek topics, sometimes a little bit of the history, where I defend leather armor from those who try to strip it away from our RPG books. How dare you? How dare you? So social issues, regards to TTRPGs, history, if you want to go and think a little too much about TTRPG and geek topics like that, I think you'd have a good time checking out youtube.com/legalkimchi.
And links to both of those and all the other important links for this episode are in the show notes. Again, thank you all so much. And, solidarity with all the other game creators out there navigating this mess and, hoping for the best. All right. Thanks, y'all. And keep rolling those dice.